Thanks for having us here. My name is Tushar. I'm managing partner at Multipoint Capital. And just to kick off, would you each like to introduce yourselves and say, a few words about your project, starting in order?
Sure. Hey everyone, I'm Abhay Kumar. I've been a core contributor on Helium since 2019. I started off as a hotspot operator, and I have been building the core protocol since. Helium is a decentralized wireless network. It's a network of networks that supports both IoT and mobile. And if you can find somebody with a backpack with a Helium mobile hotspot, you might even be able to connect to it if you have Helium.
I'm Jules. I'm the founder of the Render Network. And Render was kicked off in 2017. It's a decentralized GPU network. We supply GPUs for doing 3D rendering and, of course, now AI. It's evolved to the point where we do have major movies and television shows and NFTs that are created on the system. There's a lot of other layers of products, and we're pretty excited about the future for decentralized compute.
Ariel Simon, CEO and co-founder of HiveMapper. So we're building this decentralized global map. So the basic idea is that we built this device that looks and smells like a dash cam, but inside the dash cam is technology that is purpose-built for mapping. And there's many, many thousands of people all over the world just driving around with this device and building this map. We've, in the last little less than 2 years, mapped 25% of the global road network. And it's growing even faster today than it was even 6 months ago. And then on the other side, we're building data products for businesses and ultimately consumers, right? So think automotive companies, logistics companies, transportation companies, all utilizing and integrating that data into their systems and into their products.
Hi, I'm Mike Horton, project creator of GeoNet. GeoNet is a geospatial network that consists of a deep-end decentralized physical infrastructure network that consists of people setting up satellite mining stations, and these stations collectively provide a global hyper-precise location service. So that location service can pinpoint you to about a centimeter in XYZ, and this is an incredible utility for everyday navigation, but also a fundamental piece of infrastructure for devices like drones and robots and the next generation of artificially intelligent autonomous devices.
All right, so DeepIn has been getting a lot of attention recently as a sector, and a lot of people are really excited about it. So I just want to start from the beginning of, why is DeepIn interesting? What does it enable that you could not do if you were trying to build your company in a centralized way? Maybe we can start off with Helium here, since we were the first DeepIn network.
Second, Cloudflare was before us, but we're definitely the largest at this point, at scale. We've been around since 2019, is sort of when we launched the network as a blockchain network. I think the real unlock for us is that it enables sort of capital formation and distribution of this kind of network in a way that's really never seen before. The typical way of building telecoms is to get some real estate, build a tower on it, put a radio on it, and then every time you need to update it, someone from Verizon or in the US has to go call a local cable operator to go climb up that tower and update it. That's the sort of typical model. And one of the things that when we started our IoT network, we needed a way to rapidly deploy this network. There was no way that someone was going to use a new kind of IoT protocol without having ubiquitous coverage. And this was a way for us between 2019 and I would say 2022 or so to very, very quickly deploy a network of hundreds of thousands of nodes. And now we're starting to do the same thing in mobile.
In our case, my other business besides starting Render is a computer graphics company that sells software to artists. And we launched a product that ran on AWS with GPUs that were, there were about 10,000 of those. We would run out of those GPUs in 2015, 2016, just the prices for data center GPUs were so high. And the costs, for Amazon were always on-demand pricing. Right? You couldn't get to these spot instance pricing, which is 1/10 of that, because there wasn't enough GPUs. So we actually launched Render to solve a business case need, which was there's hundreds of millions of GPUs, gaming GPUs that are out there, even our own customers use them for rendering locally. and turning that on and flipping a switch and paying them even a fraction of what we paid AWS or what AWS would charge for on-demand messaging meant that we could have 10 times the GPU capacity. We could offer that even faster because there's way more GPUs in the network, and the cost was significantly lower. But on the node operator side, they were making more money than at the time it was 1080 Ti's mining Ethereum, so we paid more than that. To this day, if you're on the vendor network and you have a GPU, typically it takes about a year for that to pay itself off. So I think that now there's a lot of attention on GPU shortages and all of that around AI, but we were starting even before that with just normal, generative, media and CG rendering, and that's of course exploding even more so with the demand for generative AI on top of that. But in our case, we actually had a business reason to introduce that, and there was no way that any of the centralized services could offer that. To this day, we have AWS and Azure, Google as partners. They contribute their GPUs to the network, with a high security level. But almost none of our customers use that. They're rendering full-on, high-end technical movies on average users' GPUs on the network with end-to-end encryption. So it's been an interesting journey to go from that business use case to where we are today.
So in HiveMapper's case, I think there's really two unique things that Deepin enables. So one is location, and then the other one is coordination. So look, if you're mapping the entire world, who's better to map your neighborhood than you, right? The people who live in that neighborhood. And so what this enables us to do is put the technology in the hands of the people who live locally in that neighborhood and say, hey, look, you can actually participate in building this neighborhood versus like us sitting in California and like sending a driver out to the Philippines or to Seoul, Korea, or here to Singapore. So that's really powerful. The second thing is coordination, right? Because we have this incentive layer, we can basically say, look, mapping the same freaking neighborhood 1,000 times, that's actually not very valuable. But if we can say, okay, we need more coverage here, we need less coverage here, we need more frequency here, we can do that because of this incentive mechanism, which is baked into the token that we have. The last part is, I think, is pretty interesting. For those of you who probably have used Waze in your life, there's really two types of participants. So first of all, you just driving, you are actually giving Waze a tremendous amount of data for free. But then there's this other group of people we call the map editors in the industry, and they effectively sit in front of a computer and literally edit the map, right? So they draw lines effectively. And there's about 30,000 of them in the case of Waze. When Waze was acquired by Google, those 30,000 people that effectively made Waze, right? They got nothing, right? Because of this lack of coordination, lack of incentives, lack of sharing economics that something like HiveMapper embeds inside of it from day zero. So those are the three things that I think are pretty unique to us.
Yeah, so I think that it's really underappreciated how incredibly capital efficient Deepin-based infrastructure is. And then once that infrastructure is in place, what a massive economic opportunity it creates for the downstream users of that network. When we look at GeoNet, people have been trying to improve GPS accuracy for 20 years, and the major barrier to it has been the cost of deploying physical infrastructure. And traditionally, to deploy high-precision location infrastructure was sort of on the order of $100,000 per node. I mean, it was a very significant, maybe 50 to 100K per node. So the fact that GeoNet's been able to install over 9,000 of these things through contributors to the network, we're setting up these satellite mining stations. We estimate that we've built out infrastructure that's sort of $1 billion level of CapEx that would have been done. And that's happened in 2 years, incredibly fast, and with the foundation taking in about $7 million in venture capital to do that. So the capital efficiency is just phenomenal, both in terms of the amount of money it saves to deploy infrastructure through a Deepin model, the fact that the participants can get upside through rewards by deploying this infrastructure, and then all the downstream economic opportunity for things and new classes of applications that can be built because the infrastructure is there that wasn't there before. So it's just a phenomenally capital efficient way to get stuff built.
Yeah, capital efficiency, I think, is the core of the thesis for Deepin. And Jules, I have a follow-up to what you asked, because everyone in the world is talking about AI, and everyone is talking about the GPU shortage. Can you talk us through how Render helps address that? And, maybe some numbers about what's available on the network, and how pricing might compare?
So, generally, Render is tapping into consumer GPUs, of which there's hundreds of millions. So we have a wait list of about 1 million, and these GPUs are high-end NVIDIA gaming cards, like the 4090, the 3090s. Those have 24 gigs of RAM. What's in the data center and what everyone's sort of hoarding, these H100s that have this expensive interconnect, those are effectively super expensive. I mean, even if you wanted to just do rendering, the data center version of that consumer GPU is 10 times more expensive. That's why we first ran into this problem. When it comes to AI, the trends are changing pretty drastically. So for example, OpenAI at 01, their new version, their new model for ChatGPT, it's much smarter. It takes a little longer. But OpenAI put out a graph, which is we actually can take less time to train. The cost of training can be replaced with the cost of inference. In other words, running it in real time on a lower-end GPU, and it gets the answer better. And so that trend, where you don't need to do as much training in an expensive data center, and the training sort of happens in real time as you're running a query, is where I think things are going. And I think that's where having this massive sea of consumer GPUs with enough memory to provide that service is going to be huge for the future of GPU training and inference. And I do think that the cost savings will be enormous. And that's where we're seeing first with generative video and images, right? That's fairly easy to sort of take out that system. We have Ahmad, who started to see Fusion, some advice for renders, sort of helping guide a lot of that journey. But I do think that the world that we're also heading towards, and I started Render, is towards these world models where you can simulate games, you can simulate physics, you can do, of course, video, tell stories, but all those things are moving towards this one multimodal model, and I think those will be running largely on high-end consumer cards, with the training set happening really from users' data, from a lot less of a pre-computed training set that we have now that is what's costing us hundreds of millions of dollars.
Thanks, that's helpful. Ariel, I have a question for you on how DeepIn's tap into real-world demand, dollar-denominated demand, actual like customers coming into the network and not circular within the crypto economy.
Wow.
Can you talk about some of how HiveMapper does that and how you might see other sectors of crypto?
Yeah, it's crazy. We have like real contracts with real dollars. So I think the best way to think about HiveMapper, there's really two parts of it, right? There's the protocol layer that does all the incentives, all the coordination, that's one part. And then there's HiveMapper Inc., the business that looks like basically every Silicon Valley startup that you can ever imagine that is building data products on top of all the data that is being collected and processed by the network, right? And so, you got to ultimately show up to a customer's door, right? You have to build products that enable them to integrate our data products into their systems. And then, you need to support them, right? They're not going to be like, hey, if something's going wrong, they're not going to yell at the network. They want somebody to yell at, which is us, right? And so, from that perspective, and a lot of customers are interested in the crypto side. I think that one of the things that when we got into this, people are like, like normal businesses, like car manufacturers, they're not going to deal with crypto stuff. And I've actually found the reverse, right? I think they're curious about this, right? They're like, that's interesting, so let me learn more about it. But ultimately, when it comes time to doing business, they want somebody's neck that they can actually choke if something's going wrong, right? And so fundamentally, you have to be able to do both of those things, and you have to do both of those things really, really well.
Devon, I have a question for you related to touching the real world. Helium is unique amongst a lot of DeepIns in that you've actually tried to own the demand side with Helium Mobile. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about how owning the demand side versus carrier offload and selling to other people who own the demand side, and how the economics of that work for people who are participating in that work?
Now, I'll even take a step back and kind of explain this to you. It's very targeted, and maybe some of the audience would appreciate it. So, Helium Mobile is a consumer product, right? It's if you're in the U.S., you sign up and you download an app. You sign up, you get an eSIM, and it is now your carrier, right? If you look at your phone, it says Helium in the top left corner if you have an iPhone, for example. And so, to Ariel's point, like the throat to choke there is there's a customer service team that will, answer your emails when your phone service is down, and that's obviously very important for us. And that is, for me, I see that as a way for us to dogfood our own network. It's a way with, over 100,000 subscribers over, the past just few months, we've been able to see how to build a new kind of network, one that both leverages this sort of new supply of coverage, people deploying helium hotspots, and also still fall back to a traditional carrier like T-Mobile, which we partnered with and we're able to provide that global service, right? So even though you come to Singapore, you are using that sort of T-Mobile relationship with Singtel in order to have coverage here. So that's one side of the business, and that's the consumer side of the business. And typically these kinds of businesses, we're talking, you're paying sort of wholesale rates for data, and you're spending anywhere between $1 and maybe $3 a gigabyte in the US, sometimes up to $5, in order to be able to piggyback on the service. This is what's known as an MVNO in the industry. So that's one kind of business that can be built on Helium. The other business that is this sort of underlying business is this, what we call carrier offload. And the idea here is that any carrier out there wants to be able to provide a better high bandwidth service to their customers wherever they are. Typically, we think about high bandwidth applications as places with a lot of slow moving people. So think of sports stadiums, malls, promenades in cities, and coffee shops and places like that. Places where you might be sitting around and streaming TikTok or whatever. And these are the places where there's a tremendous amount of demand. And the traditional carriers don't really have the flexibility to be able to rapidly deploy supply into those places. And you sometimes see this with music festivals, right? If you've ever seen Coachella, for example, they might stand up a tower just temporarily for it, and it's still horrible. There's still 10,000 people trying to connect to one radio that's up there and barely holding on for dear life. And so, that is a very, very different business. Well, that is a business that allows other networks, major carriers around the world, to be able to leverage this greenfield network, this network that's being built by this community, in order to supplement their existing user experience. So for the AT&T user, for example, or the T-Mobile user, or the Singtel user here, those customers don't know that they're using the Helium network, but Helium hotspot deployers are getting paid for providing the service for this network that they also don't have a relationship with. And this is sort of the power of deepening, right? It kind of goes back to that thing, which is that point, which is that these are all participants that are all incentive aligned to provide the best possible service at the place where they are, and they don't really want to think about who's authenticating to who. All that should be taken care of. That's a user experience problem that should be solved by the network itself.
So, Mike, I have a question for you. I think at this point it's pretty uncontroversial and empirically proven that DPIN can scale the supply side of the network with token incentives. And we have 4 examples of that on stage today, and many more out there in the industry. Can you tell me more about how you think about scaling the demand side at GeoNet and how that demand engagement function works for you?
Yeah, so in the field of high precision geolocation, there's sort of 2 core markets. You can think about the traditional markets that have been using centimeter accurate positioning services that sort of invented the technology, and those are things like civil survey, high definition mapping, construction, farming, and one of the nice things in our space is there's standards that are strong, and so we adhere to those standards, and we're able to offer just a much better value proposition to the customers, lower cost, better coverage, easy to integrate, and so that just lets demand naturally flow in. We don't have to work that hard to create that demand, and we've been able to add 30 B2B partners that are using the service and bringing it to their customers. Then, because the infrastructure is so ubiquitous and has grown so quickly, we can enable consumer-facing applications, and that's really super exciting for us because those are the first time that people have had the experience of having hyper-precise location, which I could have used a number of times here in Singapore where I found the phone position to be quite poor. And so we're looking into applications. We have a new partnership with Animoca that will bring it into gaming, bringing it in again to consumer robotics. I think we all have many iPhones, iDevices now. I think a few years from now you'll look back and see it's a turning point in the movement of robotics. We're going to have smart robots mowing our lawns for us. We're going to have drones helping us with security. That's really that kind of infrastructure that we have enables the service to be provided to new applications that are really popping up and going to grow revenue for the network tremendously.
Ariel, I have a simple question for you. Let's just make things really simple for the audience. Why are DeepIn tokens valuable? Why is money valuable?
Yeah, great controversial question. I mean, fundamentally, it comes back to the demand side, right? Like, if in our case, we're building, well, let me take a step back. Like, there are really two customers, or two main customers for mapping, right? There's like all of you guys who use maps every single day in your life. There's about 2.5 million people who use Google Maps every single day. And then there's probably like anywhere between 500,000 to 750,000 businesses that pay for maps to integrate into their products and services, right? And so both of those are being monetized in different ways. And so if we can show up to the customer, whether it be in businesses or consumers, and offer a product that people want that they're willing to pay for, or that we can monetize them in some way, then fundamentally that flows value back into the token. And there's a couple steps for that to occur, but fundamentally that is what creates value. And I think that, you know, in the crypto, the thing that's interesting to me about the whole DeepIn category as a whole is that it is, I believe, really the first thing in the crypto world that's extending way beyond just people doing crypto trades of fun tokens here and there or store value type of stuff into the real world, right? In our case, there's billions of consumers and many millions of businesses that rely on maps. In the case of Helium, it's, you know, basically everybody with a phone is paying for wireless service. And so if crypto is going to be relevant and much bigger than it is today, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, like all of these products and services that you see here on the stage have to be successful. Because otherwise it's just like a bunch of people like trading with one another, which I think is cute and interesting, but not very big.
Why is H&T valuable?
So, H&T, we launched it back in 2019. It was given directly to hotspot owners who were providing coverage. And that same H&T is earned and used by people that were using the network. So initially it was an IoT network, so if you had a sensor, you had to burn H&T in order to pay for the network, and it was it's a fixed cost that a sensor deployer would always know about. Send a million messages, and it costs a very small amount of money a year. On the mobile side, it's the same, right? It is H&T is issued. It's maybe purchased by a mobile carrier, someone like Helium Mobile, for example, and then it's earned to use the network. So, the individual subscriber doesn't need to think about H&T and shouldn't ever think about H&T, right? They should be thinking about having great service, and their service provider, in this case, Helium Mobile, is the one responsible for buying the H&T, earning it, and paying hotspot owners for their work.
So it's valuable because real-world demand is used to then burn token, basically.
Yep. I would also add, we copied. I mean, you guys did such a great job that we applied that to Render. When Render started, it was that the token was really just about mapping to compute costs. We also implemented an earned equilibrium model, which followed what you guys were doing, and also went on Solana. And I will say that also, being in the Web3 space, the crypto space, is super interesting for media generation, right? I mean, you're talking about, trying to prove whether something's real or who made it. More importantly, though, think about NFTs, like $800 million worth of NFTs, including equal pots. All this stuff was created in our software and on chain, and those things are provably, every single texture, every piece that went into that is part of the receipt that is on chain. So if you're thinking about the future of media, where you have to sort of safeguard your IP, your faces as an actor, but you also want to pay out royalties, figure out the model beyond streaming. Crypto's great for that. I mean, you can split the proceeds of somebody viewing something 64,000 different ways and pay all those different royalties out. That's really hard to do outside of this system. So in our case, I think, not just the sort of value of the token beyond a DNU model, but also having this capability for provenance authentication, royalties. That's what crypto is really about, and I think that's one of the things that makes the DeepIn narrative on top of Render also, really valid.
Mike, would you like to add on GeoNet?
Yeah, same thing as helium. Burn and net equilibrium is a very powerful way to translate direct usage and utility of the network back to token holder value. And I think as the network grows in utility, the token value grows in value as well. So it's a very direct, I think burn and equilibrium is a very powerful thing. Our network is quite deflationary as well, in the sense when we burn it, we actually take it out of circulation by sending it to the burn address. We have this annual halving schedule. So these things help time sort of the buildup of the revenue with the buildup of the supply so that you can have a stable but growing ecosystem. And I think it works well.
All right, I want to shift gears. How do you think about composability, either with other beacons or with other protocols on the chain that you're on? DeFi protocols, etc. And maybe Ariel, you can kick it off.
Sure. Okay, so remember I was talking about that device. So it's a device that looks and smells like every other dash cam in the world and installed in your vehicle. Now, we need to ultimately take the data that we're producing on that device, which is all the map data, and we need to offload it. So the question is, how do you offload it? There's a lot of different ways. But this new device that we're introducing this year, that there are a lot of pre-orders for, called the B, that device will actually use the Helium network in the US to be able to offload all the data, right? So if you're a customer of HiveMapper that purchased the device, the B device, and you're doing mapping, then you can also go and utilize the Helium data plan, which is what, $20 a month? Very cost effective for that device, and doing your offloading, right? And so I think that's a good example of where two teams that kind of share a lot of the same values, they have great product, great technology as well, kind of coming together and integrating. So I think you got to be choosy about what you're going to spend your time on. Because I think there's a lot of projects that just kind of go out there and be like, I'm going to partner with this, I'm going to partner with this. And it's like, it makes a good press release in the moment, but there's not a lot of value for the customer on the other side. And so in this case, I think it works great. Like we want that like real-time data, and Helium is super cost-effective for that device.
Jules, how do you think about composability with other things like NFTs and you mentioned, provenance and proving that an artist created something. How do you think about tying that all together using composability within a single chain?
Well, I think, just in the DeFi space, storage is really important. So, connecting Render to, decentralized storage makes a lot of sense just on that first layer. Also having other chains that handle compute that can work within our system on their own, on similar networks or things that are running on Solana makes a lot of sense. As far as the endpoint, when you're selling something, I was bringing up the example of NFTs because what you do with provenance can be, can create a million different types of businesses. You can have, of course, storefronts where you buy digital art, but you can also then create user-generated content where you can borrow certain pieces and elements, remix them, do advertising-based models. All those things can be built on chain. And I think there's just a ton of dApps that can be leveraging this. So for us, we want to make sure that there is, the protocol support that, and that any other DeFi projects that are, really fundamentally interesting. Again, we don't want to focus on everything, but again, things like storage and also any sort of, even games, right, that have been building virtual worlds. The truth is, you want to have this kind of world model that we're sort of going after with Render as the underpinning for that. And I just foresee just a lot of different applications built on chain around this kind of infrastructure. So composability for royalties, for authorship, and for just jump-starting whole new types of business models and democratizing that makes a lot of sense for us.
Earlier this year, you had a tweet around composability. It was a good one. It was around composability for DePIN and DeFi, and it was specifically around Jupiter and how many of Jupiter's users were actually from the Helium ecosystem. Can you share with the audience kind of the content of that tweet and also the conclusions that you were able to draw from that data?
Yeah, that's a long time ago. I forgot what I tweeted about last night. Okay, I definitely remember the context. We were moving to Solana last year, and one of the many reasons why we moved to Solana is because of composability. Because there are protocols that are building the important things that I don't want to build myself, right? As a protocol dev, right? Like I don't want to necessarily build the routing engine for all the different DeFi protocols that are out there. I don't want to build, some of this sort of staking things that like someone like Gio might be building. These are the kinds of things that we saw in Solana that were available to us that we were really, really happy about being able to use. With Jupiter specifically, we have a wallet, and one of the things that we try to do with our wallet is it's a fully non-custodial wallet. It allows you to claim, manage your hotspots, claim the rewards for all the work that your hotspots are doing, and also do things like swaps. And we were able to just very simply natively integrate Jupiter in our swap interface. We didn't charge any fees on it. We just basically used the Jupiter API directly and the Jupiter smart contracts directly. And this was really, really powerful for us when we moved to Solana. Because it was just there and it just worked, and that team is awesome, and some of them are probably around here. That was one thing that was really great for us. The other thing that was great for us with Jupiter specifically is a lot of folks are coming to crypto and sort of entering into these deepins, and that is the first thing that they've ever done. They don't really think about like what is the gas token or the rent token for the chain that they're on. I have some HNT. How do I use it? How do I send it to someone? I need Sol. I'm not really sure what, how do I go get it? Do I have to go to an exchange or whatever? And one of the things that we were able to build into our protocols, really, which sort of hid the UX of Jupiter here, is to be able to do a gasless swap from HNT to Sol. And that's because of the infrastructure that they built. And so that's the way that we were able to effectively onboard 750,000 wallets onto Jupiter when we migrated. And so what we saw in practice was as folks were lazily migrating and moving their assets from our old chain to our new chain, they were starting to use Jupiter from day one, and we saw that we were a massive driver of their traffic, and awesome team, and they were hugely supportive of them, and they've gotten much bigger than that since then. We are now a small fish in their pipeline, but it was great to have another team like that building the Solana ecosystem that was just so that built a great product.
All right, so for the last question, I want to talk about ecosystems and how each of you, as builders, think about what ecosystem you want to be in and how you chose the L1 and the ecosystem that you're building in. And since you kind of answered that question just now, maybe
go that way.
Well, we started as an ERC20 token in 2017. And then it was, the gas fees were crazy, and it was impossible to get node operators paid quickly, and so we moved to Matic, not Polygon, L2. Didn't really work out great, and our sort of interest in Solana was started because it was efficient. I love Raj and Foley. I think that they've been absolutely incredible supporters of what we're doing and giving us all the resources we need to make that simple. There's also other amazing projects right in the Solana ecosystem, like what you guys are doing, which helped us move to being. So I do think that the choice for Solana now is obvious. I think that 3 or 4 years ago when we were first considering it, like my first breakpoint talk was where I was like, we're here because we believe this is the future for just efficient services, and it's proven to be true. But there's so much more in the Solana ecosystem, as you're pointing out, in terms of all the other interconnects. And I think there's nothing else quite like it. So for us, Solana's been fantastic. It has been the right choice.
Yeah, for us, we started off in Solana. I think we were technically, although Helium is definitely the George Washington of deep ends, I think we were technically the first deep in on Solana. And so we didn't, these guys went through a much harder process of kind of migrating. But for us, it was all about, cost of actually building on top of that, right? Like most people don't realize, we want all of our software developers actually building the map, not, building all of the crypto infrastructure and blockchain infrastructure type of stuff. And so we really just have one engineer who works on that, right? And I view that as great, right? I wish it was only half an engineer's time. And so that has been just incredibly cost efficient, both in terms of the transactions itself, but also the total cost of ownership of the development costs that we spend in terms of building on top of it. So we love it.
Yeah, the ecosystem question goes, and the chain goes a lot back to the composability question, in the sense that if you put these services together, it's very important for them to share a common chain. So we started out on Polygon, and we have projects that are using GeoNet for either proof of location or high accuracy location that are interested in building the Polygon ecosystem, but a lot of even projects have chosen Solana. And so when you think about putting a composable service, if we want the GeoNet token to be the token of choice and the service of choice for mapping, for example, we need to be in the Solana ecosystem. So that's really the value that we see cross-chain, is being able to support, to use the GeoNet service, you have to burn GeoNet tokens. So that is much more effective and easy to implement for another Web3 project if you're in the same ecosystem. So that composability drives a lot of the choice of chain, and clearly the Solana ecosystem, DeepIn, has emerged as a huge trend and a really powerful network for building those. So that's why we're deeply working to move into the Solana ecosystem.
Wow, all right. So thank you so much for sharing all your insights with the audience today. Appreciate it. And yeah, thank you everyone for listening.
All right, good job, guys. Thank you very much. Mike Horton. James, we love that name, Horton. All right, good stuff.